Hey everybody, my name's Craig. Welcome to my channel. Today on Critical Thinking with Craig 3, I want to talk about biases. Now biases are a gigantic topic, and I could talk about them every video from now until eternity and not get to all of them. So I don't want to do that yet. I want to talk about bias as a kind of a whole and talk about mainly two major misconceptions about them. And one thing we need to understand about bias is that biases are just predispositions towards or against something. They're not these devious, deep, dark, crazy things. They're just predispositions, preferences. Now sometimes they can hide in our thinking, and that's kind of where they get their kind of bad reputation. I mean, even in the cognitive biases that I'll probably end up talking about later in different videos, most of them we see as bad, which leads to the first misconception, and that's biases are bad, always bad. And that's just not true. You know, video done. Hey, that's one misconception down. Now I'm going to give you some examples. The first one is really pretty basic. We have a bias towards air and away from water in our lungs. I mean, I remember going to the pool with my sister when I was younger, and she was older than me, so she was bigger than me, and we'd splash and play, and then we'd try to dunk each other, and she would actually dunk me and hold me underwater, and my lungs and my brain would scream that bias for air. That's a good one. Let us survive. Another bias related to survival, goes back to our evolutionary history, and we have a bias towards sugary foods, sweet foods, and fatty foods. And the reason that is because back in the day, food was scarce, really scarce. And so if we could find sugary or fatty foods, we found a calorically dense food source, which means we didn't have to spend as much time looking for food, which meant we could do other things. We could have sex and babies and give them better food so they could grow up bigger and stronger. We could learn how to hunt better. We could learn agriculture so we didn't have to try so hard to find food. So it was a really good bias that we learned, this kind of predisposition towards these certain kinds of foods. However, in today's society, for most of the world, food isn't scarce. And so this predisposition, this bias towards sugary foods and fatty foods is leading us to become overweight and obese, which is leading to all kinds of health problems. So this bias that was good, and still kind of is if food ever becomes scarce again, in the wrong context, when food isn't scarce, can lead us to, if we're not careful, if we're not aware of that bias and we don't make adjustments for it, can lead us into bad places. Another example of how biases can be good or bad is related to, again, evolutionary history, which I use those examples because I love them. Back in the day, we grew up in small, tight groups of mostly relatives, and so everyone around us looked like us. Everyone around us had our same genes. And so when we saw someone that didn't look like us, that didn't have our same genes, whether it was, a bigger nose, bigger ears, or different color skin, we automatically didn't trust them because, again, resources were scarce and we were always fighting with each other over those resources. And so that ended up, the people that were more tribalistic survived better because they protected their resources better. So they had more resources, so they lived longer and better. The problem with that is, again, fast forward a couple 100,000 years, and you get into today's society, which is a gigantic, multinational, global economy, society, and it's really hard to find people that really look like you. And so we still have this kind of bias towards people that look like us. And we've pulled it down into, really simplistic viewpoints like skin color or hair type. And we use that, and we have that bias And so we push back against people with a different skin color, people who speak different languages. And it's really kind of silly because our problem isn't so much, scarcity for survival, immediate, on the short term. Our problem is scarcity on the long term. And the answer to that is cooperation. And so that bias that led us to survival in the past on the small scale is leading us to destruction in the future today on the long scale. So hopefully we can see that bias, adjust for it, and be more inclusive of what it means to be us, what it means to be in our clan, what it means to be, hopefully, as we move towards this, human. So that's the first one. Biases are bad. They can be bad or good. Depends on the context, depends on how they're used, and depends on the outcome. And the second one is that they're all equal. Now, I ran into this a couple days ago. I was on Facebook, and I saw a guy post something, and he was talking about another group, and instead of going to a situational thing, that the process was just complicated, he automatically went to the malicious one, that they were doing something wrong intentionally. And so I called him out on it and said, hey, your bias is showing. And another guy commented about how we all have biases, even his dog has biases, and they're not really worth talking about because everyone has them. And the interesting part is he's not entirely wrong, because we do all have biases. We're all biased, always, about everything, all the time. I mean, even the fundamental properties of nature, like, say, matter, it has a bias towards other matter. We call that gravity. And so the issue with that is not so much that we have a bias or we don't have a bias, it's what that bias leads us towards and how strong it is. Because we all, whether we want to believe it or not, we're all a little bit racist. So Harvard has this pretty amazing test. It's called the implicit association test. And it tests your kind of bias against different skin colors. And the interesting thing is that everyone has this bias. But there's a huge difference between this bias and then what it actually ends up being. Because you can have a internal bias against, say, people that are darker than you. Most people do. But if you're aware of that, or you don't let it overrun you, then you don't end up being this obvious out and out racist. There's a pretty funny story about that test. There's an older white male who went to interview, he's a journalist, went to interview the people who made this test. And he took the test and compared it to the scores of the people who actually made the test, and he actually scored lower on this implicit association test, this bias against darker people and women, than the female minority person who made the test. And I think that's pretty interesting. But at the same time, that type of bias, that type of internal, that tribalism that we got from a long time ago in our evolutionary past isn't the same thing as being a KKK member and actively promoting violence against minorities. It's just not the same thing. And so, again, I don't feel I have to explain that one very much. Not all biases are equal. And for the most part, I think people who say that in a way to, again, just dismiss other views. Oh, well, you're just biased. We all have our opinions. All our opinions are equal value. Which, again, it just isn't true. The opinion of a health blogger with a degree in marketing is not the same as the opinion of a healthcare professional. Just not. these biases aren't the same. And again, we can thank the media for this on some level. They tend to push this idea of false balance or equal balance between everything. And so when they have a story, they'll go and get this side, and then they'll go and get this other side and try to give them equal time, which generally isn't the case. I mean, in my opinion, it's good to have different voices, but you need to make sure and give the amount of time related to the value or weight or strength of that opinion. So giving a congressman from Oklahoma who likes to throw snowballs on Congress the same amount of time as the large consensus of climate scientists related to global warming is insane. It's very unhelpful. So biases are not all bad, and all biases aren't the same. You know, we judge them by how big they are, what their outcomes are, how much they mess with your decision making. And so when we think about biases, a really helpful thing to think about is them and related to our eyesight. Now, my mom tells a story about when she was growing up. She didn't have her glasses yet, so one day they went to the doctor. She had her eyes checked. They made glasses for her, and she went outside and put her glasses on, and for the first time she saw leaves in the tree. She remembers them just being like big green blobs, and now they had individual little leaves, and the world just opened up to her. And that's kind of how it is with biases. We learn about different situations. We learn about different people. We learn that minorities are people too, just like us. We get personal interaction with them. We take a college course or read up online about different people and their situations, or we learn about cognitive biases on the internet. Go to Wikipedia or Rational Wiki and look up cognitive biases, and there's a ton of them. And when we do that, we put on our glasses. What was blurry before, we now can see. I mean, there's these amazing videos online of colorblind people getting these special glasses that trick their eyes, trick their brain into seeing in color. And they're really emotional videos, and I love to watch them because for the first time, this person is seeing something that they've only heard about. And so when we learn about these issues, when we learn about the biases our brains do, when we learn about tribalism, when we learn about our predisposition towards sweet or fatty foods, we need to keep our glasses on. Because it's one thing, if you have a driver's license that requires you to have and you have a prescription and you have to wear your glasses. If you go out and get on the road and drive without your glasses and you get into a wreck, that's going to be your fault because you knew better. You knew your eyes didn't see the world correctly, that you needed a little help to see. And so you put your glasses on and you can see and you can drive and there's no problems. This is the same kind of a deal. It's the old, cliche of the racist grandpa who learns about, civil rights movement, learns about these things. And because grandpa's a good man, he actively puts on his glasses in that sense and changes his action, changes his behavior. He may still have that internal bias. He may still have that bias he got from growing up in the Deep South, or growing up in a family where minorities weren't equal. The modern deal of growing up in a situation where women aren't equal, that they're supposed to be subservient and submissive to men when they're just as equal. They're not the same, but they're equal with men. And so we've got to put on our glasses. We've got to remember that those biases are there, so that when they come up in us, and that we see that we're making we're biased towards, we're predisposed to one thing over another, that we can see that and then adjust for it. And by adjusting for it, sometimes in some of these areas, we can actually change that bias in us. Some of these things we can change kind of, but we have to keep them up on tabs and we have to remember them. And there's some eye issues, for example, that glasses will fix. A lot of them won't. So, hope that makes sense. Hope you remember, not all biases are bad, not all biases are equal, and that we need to actively seek out and find what biases are impacting our judgment, changing the way we see the world into something that it's not, so that we can, find our glasses, put on our glasses, and change the way we see the world to be closer to reality, so that we can judge better, so that we can make better judgments, so that we can not discriminate against people because of something that isn't true about them. So I hope you liked the video. Hope you like me talking about biases. I hope you all have a great day. If you like the video, hit that subscribe button so you can see more of my videos and be some of the first people to watch them. And, it'd make me feel good about myself because I'm biased towards other people liking me, I guess. Yes, I am. So y'all have a great day. I'll talk to you later. Don't kill yourself to live. Peace. Hey everybody. Welcome to my end card. We'll get nice and close right now. How you doing? Anyway, hope you liked the video. What do you think about biases? What do you think about those 2 misconceptions? What do you think I should do next in my Critical Thinking with Craig video? Is there a particular bias you want me to talk about? Is there a particular critical thinking issue that you're so angry you're pulling your hair out over? If so, let me know in the comments and I'll see what I can do. Hope you all have a great day. Again, like, comment, subscribe. You'll have a great day. See you.